G- the second topic on this story of the uh, execution of careers of CIOs in the public sector is to give you a bit of a hint about stories that I heard from some of these CIOs, to give you the flavor of how these things come about. So let me just share with you these stories. The story that I heard from, again, I'll have to keep the uh, privacy of the individuals that talk to me. Uh, but these are real stories based on real people. The one CIO that talked to me quite candidly started by telling me that one that the commissioner that came to his organization uh, presented the existing CIO with a major challenge. All the capital budgets that CIO managed to get over the years approved by council or by the political masters had to be reapplied for when the new commissioner came up. This new commissioner had a financial background and wanted to ensure that only uh, programs that are reviewed every year by council are the ones that are pushed aside. Well, of course, the uh, fights that the CIO had on his hand over the years meant that he had to each year submit a new capital budget that may or may not be approved. Not only that, but it also meant that the capability of the CIO to embark on multi-year programs was severely hampered. And obviously there was a disconnect. And when the CIO tried to explain that this really has difficult consequences for his organization, the rift became apparent and the writing was on the wall. Another CIO shared with me his story of disagreeing with both his commissioner as well as the powers that be, who wanted to put a particular project for a very, very aggressive timelines. This was about a major corporate initiative that the powers at the top wanted to push quickly. And the CIO, the existing CIO there, noted his reservations and worries that since it becomes his responsibility to deliver on that program, that without making changes to the internal processes, that timing was simply unachievable. That if this timing was to be met, significant changes had to be made. You cannot treat the organization processes as usual. Giving such an honest and realistic opinion did not sit very well. The advice was obviously not accepted. In fact, it brought the wrath of the project proponents who accused the CIO of throwing obstacles. And again, it does not take much to realize that if the CIO was smart, he probably would have to accept the timelines and then go and change as obstacles are thrown. But this CIO particularly wanted to be truthful, and so as a result, the disconnect happened. The CIO grins as he notes that a couple of years later, that same project is still behind times, just as he predicted. A third story is from a CIO who told me that the organization simply wanted to uh, put his career aside, uh, waiting for him to or her to retire, but they wanted to bring a new CIO who would be a change agent who would make significant changes to the organization in accordance with the wishes of senior management of the corporation. The existing CIO had really difficult time with these directions, but since he was simply biding his time till retirement, he stood on the side and watched, grinning, as a new CIO was brought about to make the required significant changes that were promised. The changes were made, and sure enough, they created havoc in the organization. And the second CIO that I talked to explained to me that after all that havoc, and just when the organization was about to bear fruits for all the changes he made, senior management blamed him for everything, of all the upheaval, and he was summarily called for to leave the organization. Again, a classic case of someone who is brought for a purpose, and the organization blames him for what they already knew was going to be the consequences of the change they were looking for. Clearly, they knew that the impacts of implementing such rapid and major changes were going to be severe. Nevertheless, I suppose they were looking for a scapegoat to make the changes and then to blame him as he departs the organization for these changes. Interesting game. Another story I heard from another CIO dealt with actually it was as simple as this. His story was that, whether right or wrong, I don't know, that the organization as a whole looked at the total cost. They had a problem with meeting a certain tax increase, and they decided to look at IT, and that was the target where they were going to attack IT and reduce its budget significantly, and he was at the top of the list to cut in order to meet a certain budget target. That was the reason I was given to this CIO. So I'll come back to this in a minute, but I think maybe I'll share with you a few more stories. But before I share those stories, I wanted to make it clear that in every case of the CIOs that I spoke to, none of them was their careers were terminated for cause. Every one of them was without cause, which meant, of course, that this organization they worked for had to cough up significant amount of money in order to terminate the careers of these people. Now, I mean, in retrospect, you would say, well, these amounts are insignificant given the large budget most of these public sector organizations have. But I think untracked implications and costs to the organization when the senior leadership of IT leaves the organization. There is no doubt about it in my mind that the consequences are not simply the severance that's paid to these CIOs, but the spillover effect at every level of the organization that is affected by the termination of these careers.